Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. And how about you?
I'm doing great this morning. Thanks for asking. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we'll be talking about reaping what we sow. What we put out is what we get back. What goes around comes around. What exactly is a spiritual dividend, and how do we use them to enrich our lives? We will explain how a connection to the life force works and how it has been misunderstood. Life isn't some contract we make with the divine to get things, but an opportunity to become divine. Swami will explain what happens to the individual who desires nothing, actually gets everything. So join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and then become the change you want to see. So Swami, I guess my first question is about reaping what we sow. What we put out is what we get back. Is that what you talk about when you say, energy follows mind, and it's kind of like everything we put out there in the world comes back to us, sometimes 2 times, 3 times?
Well, to answer your question, what we put out is what we get back is the law of karma. It's the law of reciprocity. For every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. How we think is what we become. That's our creative principle. That's how we are shaping our reality. That things begin on the mental level and then we start to manifest. But as we start to put things out, everything we put out has an equal and an opposite reaction chained to it. And that's a big part of trying to create a life that is well-balanced, is to be able to manage your karma, to be mindful of what it is that you're putting out, and using what we call your mental functions so that you do take consideration for consequences, that if I do this, that there is a possibility of this, and this to happen. So no matter what it is that you're doing, you're trying to anticipate that something is going to come back to me as a result. And so whatever it is that you want or the way that you want to be treated in life, that's the way that you want, that's the actions you want to take, that's what you want to be putting out, if that helps.
It does. So our spiritual dividends, is that what you mean by that? Like, I know you talk about the conduct, and it's not really about our conduct, it's about our connection. But at the same time, we still have to behave like we're in the adult state.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you, like you say, your conduct is a big part of how you're shaping your reality, because those are all of our actions. And then, like you had said, what we're putting out is what we're getting back. And so in order to maintain a very well-balanced life that isn't really productive of a lot of retribution, unresolved issues, burns clean, you really want to be mindful of what you're putting out.
I know, like in mantra last night, we, dedicated our mantra to some folks that, could use some positive energy right now. And that we did because it just seemed like not the right thing to do, but, it's kind of like putting these people in the front of your mind, and if energy follows thought, then we dedicate our mantra to people in need, then we're kind of hoping that this energy is going to get there, but we didn't do it to put a check mark under our names and conduct. We did it because it was as we truly want these people to feel better.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that when you put something out without any need for return, like trying to do something because it's going to benefit you, even though doing good deeds on a very broad scale does benefit everybody. So again, it's better than putting out negative energy, wishing bad things on people, and then having it all come back on you. Mm-hmm. But it's a way of approaching your life in a way that start to, like we said in the show, you start to reap the benefit of these dividends, that what you're actually putting out is bringing more positive things into your own life. Mm-hmm. And doing it in a way that doesn't have that as an intention in and of itself, that you're actually thinking more for the betterment of someone else or a greater whole, as opposed to I, me, mine.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what you talk about when we talk about get the light in your soul and become the change you want to be. So if we think and we behave in a certain way, then we're kind of hoping that that's going to be a domino effect with those around us and the communities around us.
Yeah, well, see, the light in the soul, the whole concept of connecting to spirit, really changes everything for an individual, because it basically changes your value system. It changes what it is that you desire. And it's a very different world when you actually desire nothing. When you feel connected to something that's pure, it's powerful, it's sacred, it's not going anywhere, and you're indulging yourself in the availability of this resource, and your inner environment is just percolating. And the other thing that's happening is that your identity starts to transcend the limits of just seeing yourself as a separate entity. That's one of the pitfalls of staying attached to duality, is that your mind remains small and your feelings are reduced to these insatiable cravings. So the connection, the whole light in the soul, produces a completely different entity. And one of the things, like you had said, that humans in the adult state, they do not need laws. We need laws to uphold the conduct that you do naturally when you're a human in the adult state, when you're a human that desires this void or this nothing. Or maybe better said, as Jesus said it, is when you love God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. Because you're really not attached to the outside world any longer. And so the things that would tempt you in that dimension of reality, that energy field, have lost their pull.
You reminded me of a story that I'd heard about an initiate who goes to a master to learn about, spirit and to become with spirit, and the master takes him to the water and dunks him underneath and holds his head underwater, and he's sputtering for breath and he's flailing about, trying to get breath. And then when the master finally lets him out of the water and says, when you want breath and you want spirit as much as you want, when you want spirit as much as you want air to breathe, then I know that you're worthy to be initiate to get on the spiritual path. What do you think about putting that type of importance in wanting to desire nothing?
Well, that's exactly what has to happen. That when you really cross-examine it, I mean, that's why we are in the state that we're in, is that we are looking for something less important than the life force. And the physics of spirituality is like attracts like. But you really have to, that's why Jesus says you must love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind. It's not an intellectual accomplishment. You literally have to get it in your body. And if you really cross-examine it, like one of the things that the rhetorical question we begin most of the programs that we offer is, what would matter if your next breath wasn't there waiting for you? Now, for the average person, we're not celebrating the availability of our next breath. We're looking for something else. And the reason is because of the pattern of our bodies. Our bodies come in with programming. We look for food, mother, and approval. And so a big part of becoming spiritual is you must change that pattern. You have to change the reward circuits in your brain. You have to change these neurological pathways, but you have to program it so that the forces that are really important to you are the symbols that will produce this feeling in your body that you're okay, that I'm happy, I'm special, I'm good enough. And if the change doesn't go that deep, then it really has no power.
I had a lot of girlfriends growing up that were raised Catholic, and they had to go to confession, and they had to confess their sins. And I thought that was such an odd thing. And for one, I was like, I wouldn't want to tell somebody all the bad things I did all week long, and nor could I remember everything. But when we talk about the spiritual dividend, and you say how it can enrich our daily lives, I know you have a process and a procedure that you do where you kind of replay the whole day in your mind, and if you could change something that you could have done differently or said differently, that can sort of rewrite that energy for the day. Is that something that can help us? That can help us how we perceive something that had happened? I mean, does it really change things if we do that particular exercise?
Well, to answer your question, the exercise is designed so that we don't continue to make the same silly mistakes over and over again. Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different return. Or that if, say, for example, at the end of a day and you look at a particular event or a situation or an incident that happened that particular day, and the question that I would do is given the opportunity, what would I have done differently? And if I do come up with something, then of course, if I'm in a similar situation, a better plan to now handle that situation. But if I do not go back and review it and think about that and create maybe a different response, then of course chances are that I am just going to continue to be reactive because I haven't changed that pattern.
Great. I have another question that I'll ask you when we come back from our break. So, listeners, we're going to hold that thought and pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So we'll be back with you in a few moments, and then I'll also turn it over to those callers who have come in. If you have any questions for Swami, well, you can ask them at that time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Kriya Yoga Series 1 live classes and videos. Get your arms around the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga.
You know, the intention of why we practice is to embody spirit, to feel connected to the life force.
Kriya Yoga Asana live classes and videos. A cosmically engineered system of exercises to initiate apotheosis. A system of exercises engineered for dining and dancing at the Cosmic Ballroom. Kriya Yoga Series 2 live classes and videos. A practice in open form designed to facilitate positive growth of consciousness. Get your Labyrinth video.
I find the positive side of it is pulling a lot of things together.
Kriya Yoga mantra and meditation. With repetition comes absorption. Pray on prana and become divine.
At the same time, we all have a unique talent and gift to give back to the universe.
Private sessions. The mysteries of the universe have always been handed down verbally from teacher to student. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So at this time, I'd like to open up to any of those callers out there today. If you have any questions for Swami, now would be a good time to ask. Okay, Swami, so I have another question for you, getting back to what we were talking about. Yesterday we had a situation in our class, and we were talking about feelings and thoughts being good or bad. How can we learn to not put a label on things that are good or bad to help us achieve our spiritual dividends?
I think labeling sometimes can be somewhat problematic, and a lot of it is I think changing a lot of our just thinking about what we think being spiritual is, period. It's kind of like what you started saying before about the whole concept of confession, this whole concept of forgiveness of sin, that for me, that is a very different dynamic, and the whole concept of different kinds of sins, venial sins, mortal sins, it makes you think that sin is an incident that can be excused, when in fact sin in reality is a situation that must be corrected. That sin, there aren't many different types of sin. There's really only one sin. There's only one truth. There's only one God. There's only one number one need. And the sin is that if you do not choose that as your source of desire, if you do not connect to that resource. So the whole concept of good and bad and right and wrong and conduct and all of that kind of puts your understanding of what being spiritual is in a very different category as far as I'm concerned, that I try and keep it very simple and not complicate it. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, the concept of good and bad to me is anything that is leading me towards my connection to this resource would be good. And anything that is pulling me away from it would be considered bad. But as far as, me setting up some sort of, battlefield or camp, it's not the way I envision it happening.
So we just have to be very clear in our actions and our thoughts and what we say. And if we put God first, if we put this kind of spiritual aspect in our behaviors and, like I said, thoughts and deeds and things like this, then we actually start building a new foundation for ourselves to be able to desire nothing. Because in order for us to desire nothing, there has to be kind of steps along the way for us to get to that point. I mean, do you think we have to not want something else and want and desire the nothing? But I think there are some steps we have to take.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why we had to be taught how to do this. But to understand that it's not some sort of contract we have with this person. That the concept of being spiritual is actually a conversion that takes place. That you are a human being that no longer seeks things that are visible and tangible or invisible and tangible, but you are now a human being that seeks out something that is invisible and intangible. Mm-hmm. And like we had said in the show, if you do not change the pattern in your body so that you actually internalize this new source of sustenance in the body, then nothing really happens. Now, typically what happens is that you're substituting this intellectual, this devotional mirage for true spiritual reality. You're in your head, and you're pretending to be spiritual. But in reality, you're still longing for something that is dualistic. And it's not giving you the return that you really want. This whole thing that will make you a whole person, this thing that will initiate this progressive cycle where your identity will begin to transcend the limits of seeing yourself as a separate entity. And there's only one way that this goes right. Everything else was what they called a sin. It missed the mark.
So it's really not enough to just simplify your life. Like we talk about, preparing the body, eating the right kind of foods, and simplifying everything. Like you just said, not wanting things, for example, not wanting matter. But it's not enough just to simplify. You have to really want this energy field. You have to really want to have this connection. So just merely simplifying and hoping it's going to come isn't really enough. You have to have that thought and direct that thought to wanting to have spirit.
I really like the way that C.S. Lewis said it in Mere Christianity. The whole thing that you have to try and figure it. It's like we come into an incarnation and we are like a field of grass. But we want to become a field of wheat. And so you can't just cut down the grass. What you have to do is you have to plow up the field and re-sow it with a different seed. Mm-hmm. And that's what being spiritual is really all about. That you literally have to, like you said, you have to prepare your body for this conversion. And if the changes don't go deep enough, then of course you're going to continue to draw from whatever it is that you are drawing from. And there's nothing intrinsically evil with it, other than the fact that there are differences between worldly happiness, intellectual happiness, and this thing called eternal happiness. And if you're seeking out eternal happiness and you do not plow up the field and re-sow it with the right seed, chances are that you are going to mistake this concept of duality for this concept of the unified state. And those are things that are typically always addressed in scriptures. The concept of false gods, the concept of avidya in yoga is mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. But a big part of a spiritual practice is having all of your ducks in order. And that's one of the things that I think is very different about the way that we teach yoga, is that we lay it out so that it is more that the participant has a better understanding of the physics of spirituality. You have an understanding of what it is I'm trying to do, and then, of course, what is it going to look like when I'm actually doing it? Because what does life look like when you love God with your heart, your soul, and your mind? And if you are not clear about what you think God is, and if you think God is a person, then, of course, you're drawing from an energy field that will not give you what it is that you're trying to get. But if you understand that God is the force right now supporting your life, this invisible, intangible resource, then you've got a better chance of connecting to it. But once you get it into your body, and then, of course, the physics of spirituality, you must prepare the body. You have to purify the body in order to get this more subtle source of sustenance into it. And if you do not do that, then, of course, you can't get it in. And that's, where I think things like confession were really kind of poisonous, misleading, I want to say, practices that kind of cloaked the simple fact that, our religions just aren't doing what they were intended to do.
That's the understanding I get from talking to folks that I know that were brought up, Catholic, and they kind of had those same thoughts, but then now it's so ingrained in them that their conduct is either good or it's bad, and that's what we have to kind of get over. So we need to recognize if we have to plow our fields over and start planting the wheat. And then once we do that, I've also heard you say something about you have to tend to your garden. You got to pull out the weeds. So if you recognize a thought that could be detrimental, then we have to change that pattern or what had created that thought. So it's not just plowing down the field. It's about maintenance.
Oh, exactly. You've got to continue to nurture what it is that you have sown, and also patrol the frontier and pulling out all of the weeds, all of the things that will start to grow in that field that you didn't plant.
Well, I think it's about that time we have to start closing down our program. So in closing, I'd like to invite you listeners out there to visit our website. You can follow us on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook, of course. And also available to you listeners are the online classes that you can access through the website. Just click on the link for the online classes. That will direct you to Powwow, and from there you can select the classes of your choice. But keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We will be discussing about the new moon in Libra. So, Swami, any final thoughts or comments about our show today or next week?
Well, just to remind people to be mindful of what they're putting out, because what you put out is what you're going to get back, and what goes around comes around. And with that, I would wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.